people. This is a panel on law enforcement. It's a panel on law enforcement. My name is Mark Gibney. I'm a member of the Political Science Department at UNC Asheville. And as you can see, we have an extended panel. The panel was 4 people 2 days ago. A 5th was added yesterday, 3 more today, and I suppose I could say if anyone else wants to join the panel. No, I say that in jest. Let me first thank the students. I want them to be recognized, particularly if they're here. I think you heard this morning that this is part of a class, but I don't think you know who some of these students are. So let me introduce the students who are responsible for this panel, data collection on this panel. And that is David Cox, who will actually be running through some of the findings of this group, and he'll be our first speaker. We also have Meredith Morgan. Go ahead, Meredith. Why don't you stand up and be recognized? Katie Ketz, who's sitting next to her. Yeah, Albert Perkins and Edmund McIntyre. Okay? In terms of how we're going to proceed, one of the things that was striking to me this morning was how many people wanted to talk and were not able to. And actually, 2 of the people who wanted to talk were not able to. I decided, well, I'll ask them to join our panel. As I say to my students, my philosophy in life is help me, help you. They hear that all semester long here. So one of the things is we have not had young people. Right? I think there was an age limit of 50. You had to be over 50 in order to be heard. Is Dolly 50? I don't know. She looks good for her age. So I've added some younger people. I think we need to hear from some younger people. One of the things I also want to achieve here is for people to talk about where do we go in a very concrete way. And what I would like would be, at the end of the session, 5 concrete proposals of things that can be done. So I would ask our panelists here to be thinking of that. I would also be asking the audience to be thinking in those terms. Okay, let me introduce the entire panel, and then I'm going to turn it over to David. My sense is that nobody has been looking up at the data that the students collected, for the most part. I think it's also a little bit hard to see. I was sitting in the back, it was hard to see. So I'm just going to have him run through, I think, 5 slides and just explain what the findings were. But the order that will go when first David Cox, then Theodis Beck, who is the Secretary of Corrections in the state of North Carolina, then Calvin Hill, Judge Calvin Hill, and I didn't realize he was a judge, Van Duncan, Sheriff of Buncombe County, and Bill Hogan, Chief of Police in Asheville, then the 2 members of the City Council, Dr. Carl Mumpower and Jan Davis, and then the youth movement, Anita Acadico and Jason Jackson, who will be speaking from the young people's point of view. And you can see the audience looking. There's a young person up there. Who could that be? So, David, go ahead. Take it away.
Okay.
Show us what you found.
On this slide here, of the population of Asheville in 2005, blacks made up 13.9% of the population in the city, as compared to being 34.5% of all people searched after they were stopped by APD. This is in comparison to whites making up 83.1% of the population, as compared to them making up 62.3% of those searched. Whites made up 59% of those arrested in 2006, in comparison to blacks making up 37% of those arrested in 2006. In Buncombe County, blacks made up 7.5% of the population, while whites made up 89.1%. However, blacks made up 34.9% of prison entries for 2005 into the Buncombe County prison system. This is in contrast to whites, who made up 61.6% of the prison entries. As for the total prison population, blacks made up 38.3%, while whites accounted for 58.7% of the total Buncombe County prison population. These are the summary-based arrests for juveniles by race from the North Carolina Department of Justice. Black juveniles made up 53.31%. Black juveniles made up 53.31% of those arrested by the APD in 2005, as compared to white juveniles making up 43.89% of those arrested. As a note, the total juvenile population in Asheville for 2005 was 6,419. Black juveniles made up 23.8% of the total juvenile population, while white juveniles made up 76.2% of the total.
Is that it? Okay, thank you. And that's some of the work that the students did, and each of the groups had students working on that. Theodos, I'm going to turn the microphone over to you. Theodos Beck.
Thank you, Mark, and good afternoon to all of you. Good lunch, I can tell. Well, I want to spend just a little time this afternoon, or my portion on the program, and give a perspective on the criminal justice profession from where I sit. Now, you may find it odd as to why I would even be speaking at the state of Black Asheville, but I think I can bring to you a perspective from a statewide view. In many respects, I think the Department of Correction can be viewed as a public service agency of last resort, because by the time individuals get to us, they've gone through a lot of agencies, they received a lot of services, and then they see us, and that's sort of where the buck stops. Now, I'll talk a little bit about what I see, I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing, and I'll just make a suggestion as to what you may be able to do in this regard. And if you can think about it from just Buncombe County, you can think about it from a statewide perspective, but if it's something positive, then we all win, no matter if it's local or if it's state. Now, what we have seen coming into the Department of Correction from Buncombe County ranks the 7th highest out of the 100 counties in terms of number of individuals coming into the state's prison system. And by the same token, we released an equal amount back to Buncombe County every year. So if you're 7th largest coming in and you're the 7th largest going out, and they're coming right back here. And so the question then becomes, do you want a better person when they return than you believe they were when they left? And I think you do. I think that's what all of us strive to do in our profession. And I think that we are making some significant gains in what we're being able to do. It just wasn't that long ago that the basic agenda and the watchword was lock them up, throw away the key. Now, I think that has gone full circle, and I think now we are back to the reality of this situation, is that over 98% of everybody who's sent to prison comes back home. So it's not in our best interest to allow people to keep going back to prison. We've got to do some things with them to prepare them to make better choices, give them some tools that will help them be productive when they return, but then the community has to be willing to receive these people when they come back. They have to give them an opportunity to try and utilize some of the things that they've done or learned while they were incarcerated. I sort of look at this whole corrections piece, particularly in prisons, as a bell curve. And on the front end of that bell curve, what you will find is individuals, in my opinion, now you got to understand, this is Beck's philosophy. This is not substantiated by any academic research, but I've seen a lot in 32 years. On the front end of the bell curve, what you see is people who, in all probability, were in the wrong place at the wrong time, made one bad decision, and they found themselves in prison. Or it could have been accidental. And in spite of what we do or what we fail to do, those people will not return to prison. On the back end of that bell curve, there are people who have done some pretty bad things, and there are some people who will serve the rest of their lives in prison. They will never see freedom again. So our challenge is in the middle of this bell curve. That's where we focus on, trying to assist these people in dealing with substance abuse problems, education, vocation, programs, religious services, all of these types of programs that we hope will make a difference. Now, there's been and continues to be a lot of discussion about this whole issue of DMC, disproportionate minority contact, disproportionate minority confinement. You have to kind of pick which one you want to use. But the fact is that there are more African Americans in our prison system than there are white inmates. And it's the same thing that's happening coming out of Buncombe County. The percentage is pretty much the same as the gentleman shared with you earlier. You know, we see about a third or 60, almost 70% of the inmates in the prison system are African American. And that's about the same number that comes out of Buncombe County. That's about the same number that goes back into Buncombe County each year. But you know, the interesting thing about this whole conversation is the Department of Correction did not send out any invitations. We didn't invite anybody, but they come. So it does beg the question is, how do we address the disproportionality? And I think that there are some things that we see here. What we see as common is low academic achievement and the presence of alcohol and drugs. Those two factors seem to be common amongst most of the people who enter our prison system, not just from Buncombe County, but all across this state. So what that tells you, or what that tells us, is that the vast majority of people who come are less than high school graduates, and they've been involved in alcohol and other drugs. So if we're going to get on the front end of that, then we have to deal with those two issues. They may give opportunity and hope for success if we can improve academic achievement and if we can keep folks away from alcohol and drugs. We're going to continue to do that in terms of addressing problems within the system. But we are also working with these folks to give them some skills and tools to help them be successful, and it's called reentry. Transition and reentry is large all across this nation because the price tag for being tough on crime has now come home to rest. We in the last 5 years, we have built 5 1,000 cell facilities, open and occupied. And we currently have another one under construction. The price tag for that prison that's currently under construction, 1,000 cell, is almost $100 million. And the annual operating budget will be in the neighborhood of $20 million a year. So you tell me whether or not the state can continue to build these types of prisons and have the recidivism rates as they are without all of us trying to address it, because we are paying for this. Okay? Now, I also recognize and that, and now this is not my comment, but it is one that I have embellished, because one of our legislators said to us in one of our committees, if people don't feel safe, nothing else matters. If people don't feel safe, nothing else matters. And so that's one of the things that I think we've gotten good at addressing this issue of crime. But now, if you can't have it both ways. You either want to pay for the protection, pay for the security, or you know what the alternative is. But we've got to fight this, I think, on both sides. We've got to do a better job of prevention, and then we've got to get maximum use out of the corrections dollars that we're spending. But that requires all of you, all of us working together for a common cause. Now, we do quite a bit of religious services and a lot of volunteers coming in and out of our prisons every year. But let me tell you, the vast majority of our inmates are African American, and the vast majority of our volunteers all across this state are white. We talk the talk, but we don't come when it's time to get serious. And that's what we need. We have religious ministry that's very active and doing a lot of good in our system. And so we would invite you to think about it. Yep, the preaching, the praying is all fine. But at the end of the day, when these folks come home, they want to be able to sit beside somebody in church. They need somebody to pick them up and take them to church. They need somebody to call when they get into a difficult moment. Because, you know, a person who's released from prison in about a couple of weeks, if they haven't gotten a decent place to stay and a job, chances are things are going to start to go bad for them pretty quickly. So, yeah, you know, when we get tough, you know, we get really tough. We know how to be tough, but we got to find some compassion. Because I'm also reminded of what I was told early in my career is there could be no justice without a little mercy. Takes both. So what I would simply say to you today is that we would invite all of you to pay attention to what's going on. And you need to start following what is happening in the criminal justice arena. Because when you all of a sudden you come around and you say, well, when did that happen? Well, structured sentencing law been on the books now since 1994. And so you look at the grid, you look at the instant offense, you look at the prior record level, and boom, that's what you get. A lot of discretion is gone. But this is what we asked for because we felt that we needed to make our community safe. And I think we can do that with all of us working together. Certainly, I would welcome your questions at the appropriate time, and I look forward to working with each of you. And thank you for allowing me this time to share in your program.
Judge Calvin Hill.
Good afternoon. It had not been my intent when I came to be a part of this panel. I was coming here to sit where you're sitting and to listen and try to learn something from what was going on. And when I got here, Dr. Mullen informed me that I would be a part of this panel. And my perspective, as of about a month ago, is beginning to change from what it has been for about the last 12 years. I have worked since I came to Buncombe County in July of 1995 as a criminal defense attorney. So I have defended people charged with everything from traffic tickets to capital murder. And my focus has primarily been client-driven, and I have not paid a whole lot of attention to whether my clients were black or white. My job as a lawyer has been to defend them. I can say, however, from working where I have worked and watching the people who have come through the system, that a disproportionate number of them have been African American. What the reasons for that would be, I don't know. But my comment would be that we can't have it both ways. And by that I mean we have a number of large public housing developments in Asheville. And the people who live in those areas want to feel as safe in their environments as the people in North Asheville, people up by the Grove Park, or wherever. People in those developments want to feel safe. And so they are begging law enforcement to come in, to see what is going on in this area, and to arrest the people who are committing crimes. It happens that the people who live in public housing primarily are African Americans. So it should not be surprising that when you are in contact with public housing, where primarily the larger number of people who live there are African American, it shouldn't be surprising that the large number of arrests will be African American. And that's unavoidable. You can't say, we want to feel safe, we need law enforcement in here, come in and get the drug dealers or come in and get the burglars, and then complain when the dockets are primarily African American. So we have to make some choices. Now, on the other hand, are there areas in Buncombe County that are primarily occupied by people who are not African American, who are not being policed, who are not being arrested? I don't know the answer to that question. What I don't believe is that law enforcement is intentionally turning a blind eye to areas where criminal activity is happening for the purpose of arresting African Americans. I don't believe that that is true. So do we have some problems in this county? Yes, we do. Is it involving race on some occasions? Probably. But having worked my whole career with law enforcement, Asheville Police, and with Buncombe County, the larger part of the officers that I have had personal contact with, and I've had personal contact with at one time or another, probably all of them who have worked here from 1995 up until last year. And the large majority of them are just like you and I. They are concerned about themselves or their families being hit by somebody who is driving drunk, and that is without talking about whether the driver is black or white. Doesn't make any difference. They are concerned about feeling safe in your home, and it doesn't make a difference about whether the burglar is black or white. They are concerned about drug dealers in whatever neighborhood they may be in, and it doesn't make any difference about whether they are black or white. So there are some issues that we need to discuss, and this is a great start place for this to happen. Recently, I was appointed as a judge here in this area, and I don't have any idea what I can do as a judge to address the problems that we have related to race in this area. And I'm hoping to listen today and see what type of suggestions and questions will come out of this forum. I do appreciate you allowing me to be here and be a part of it today.
Thank you. Sheriff Van Duncan, Buncombe County.
Good afternoon. I didn't attend lunch, so I'm not quite as sleepy this afternoon as some. I'm very honored to be here with you today as your new sheriff of 3 months, and probably the best thing to say is I think we're on the right road and we're moving in the right direction, but we still have some miles to travel. Now, there's two things primarily that I wanted to talk with you about today. And the first one is about diversifying our sheriff's office, your sheriff's office. Pull some statistics as of Friday, and that's always a moving target with an agency as large as we are. and there are 322 employees at the Buncombe County Sheriff's Office. 91 of those employees are female, 21 are minorities, and 14 are African American, both male and female. We have not done a tremendously good job in being representative of the communities that we go out to serve, and we realize that. We met with our command staff week before last, and two of the things that we looked at primarily were recruitment and promotional processes, and how we could be more fair and make sure that we have a level playing field when we go out and we recruit new officers, both for the detention center and also for the road and patrol positions and detectives and whatnot, and also how we could make sure that we promote fairly within. And we have some plans on the table that we're drawing up that we want to solidify and have those things in place by July, to where all hiring now currently done at the Sheriff's Office is done through the County Office of Personnel. And what I mean by that, they don't make the final decision, but they are the initial point of contact. So we can get everything standardized and give everybody an equal shot at getting in and applying for employment with us. We also are looking at, from that point on, when we look at hiring, we're looking at a merit-based hiring and promotional board. And we need to have that board made up of minority members, as well as have female members on that panel, as well as have people inside that are involved in law enforcement and some outside influence from local business. Many of you are very successful in Asheville, and the things that you've done to make yourself successful in our community, we want to bring and employ to the Sheriff's Office to help us select good candidates. We are very aware that we need to become more diverse in your Sheriff's Office. And hopefully next year, when we meet again, and I hope we meet again, for another one of these forums, we can report back to you some better statistics. Something else that I want to talk with you about is something that Mr. Beck referred to, and that's taking a more active role in our corrections end. And for us, that's detention. When our new 247-bed facility will be complete, we will house, on average, about 600 inmates at the Buncombe County Sheriff's Office. Now, that's pretty shocking for a community our size. But what I can tell you is you do have some people in your community that are taking an active role. I met with the Ministerial Alliance this past week, and they came up, and basically what was on the agenda was talking about how we can get more faith-based and addictions recovery access into our detention center. Now, I very strongly believe in good, accountable law enforcement, but I equally believe in that we have to show folks a different route once we have them held accountable for what they've done, so they can do differently than what they did to get them in there. And also with that, not only just having more access for them in our detention center, we talked about support programs when they come out. Community support, church and other community support, AA, trying to get them involved in support groups when they come out of the detention center so they don't go right back into the lifestyle and the bad influences that put them in there to begin with. These are things that we're very aware of, and we want to make a very concerted effort to do much better. The last thing I will leave you with, not only are the numbers at the detention center up, the first 6 weeks that we were in office, we pulled our response times and call volumes for the Buncombe County Sheriff's Office. And we compared them to the same 6 weeks a year ago. And in 12 months, we've gone up 24.4% in call volume. So we're growing in call volume by about 2% every month. And that's it's kind of startling. And we have some challenges ahead, but I think forums like this are a good way to get some collaborative thinking and efforts. And I hope to take home some ideas today that will help us address the problems that we're experiencing right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The merry-go-round continues. Chief of Police Bill Hogan.
Well, good afternoon. I am delighted to be here and to share with you some of the challenges that we face in this community, but quite frankly, face in law enforcement throughout this nation. And that's one of the things I want to talk about. I've been involved in law enforcement for the last 33 years, and I've served in 4 different cities and 3 different states. And the challenges that I've seen in those 33 years and the challenges I see here in Asheville are the same ones I've seen in every community. And I think it's difficult to talk about law enforcement without talking about the social issues that I think feed in to the issues of enforcement and some of the statistics that we've already seen. Throughout my career, I have seen poverty play a significant fact in criminal behavior. The sense of hopelessness, and when folks don't have the money and they don't have a quality of life, sometimes they turn to crime. There's no doubt about it. School dropout, it's already been mentioned in terms of corrections. I was just talking to Wilma Sherrill just a few minutes ago because I'd heard Gene Bell talk about a figure in prisons, and I think Wilma said that she was doing some research, and it was 70% of all inmates are high school dropouts. And what future do they have? What can they do with their life if they don't have the skills and the tools to be gainfully employed? And that's another challenge that we face. And the big one that I see time and again, because I've seen good families, even in poverty, overcome crime and overcome the temptation to get involved in illegal drugs and a host of other things. And I've seen good families instill in children the desire to have an education. But what we often see in law enforcement, when we go into communities, we go into neighborhoods and we're policing, and when we deal with youth that are involved in criminal activity, they're coming from homes that are broken, some homes that are dysfunctional, parents that have no parenting skills. In fact, parents sometimes that grew up without being parented too correctly themselves. And they struggle to influence the children in a positive way. But a lot of times we can see in law enforcement, we see kids starting on a path as young as 10 and 12 years of age, realizing that when they become 16, 17, 18 years of age, they're more likely going to be involved in criminal activity and violent criminal activity. And we see that time and again. So I wanted to just note those challenges that we face. And anything that we do in law enforcement, I don't think is going to be tremendously effective if we also don't address the social issues. That is what we need. We need to address the social issues that breed criminal activity, breed the sense of hopelessness that exists in this community and communities throughout this country. As has already been mentioned, police go where crime is at, and I appreciate the judge's comment on that. Citizens cry out to us to come to the neighborhoods where crime is obvious, and we do. We go there, and we try to disrupt that criminal activity. We try to make a difference, and we do make the arrest. We try to create a presence and actually be seen there to prevent crime. One of the things that saddens me, before coming to Asheville, I was the police chief in Rocky Mount. And one thing that I really find is challenging and puzzling is what is often referred to as black-on-black crime. I know that we have had experiences here in Asheville, and I saw the same thing in Rocky Mount, where we have these neighborhood conflicts, if you will. And a group of black youth will go into one neighborhood armed with guns. There'll be a dispute of some sort, some conflict that started this, and then the retaliation is to go into that neighborhood and literally randomly fire guns in the neighborhood. And then that takes it up the next step, and then the other neighborhood goes back, and the same kind of conflict occurs. So that's another issue, and I think, again, it's part of this social conflict that we're trying to deal with. I personally believe that we as a society have to continue to educate our children, ensure that they're raised with a sense of values. It breaks my heart to see kids come into this world, and I've interacted with a number of them. I'll give you one example. We had a 21-year-old incarcerated, and he was asking for a cigarette, and he was aggravated, and so I just stopped for a minute, and I was talking to him, and I said, what are you going to do with your life? You're 21 years old. You've got your whole life ahead of you. His response to me was, what difference does it make? I'll never see 25. That's the sense of hopelessness that I'm talking about that we have to change. These children have to be raised with a sense of the importance of education, dreams and aspirations to do something with their lives. Because when they grow up and they're living for the moment and they have no sense of future, it's hard to turn their lives around. And they're headed down a path they're going to end up in corrections, and maybe more than once. So that's what I think is critical for all of us in this room, all of us in this community, and all of us across this country, is building respect for the law and creating social systems that are going to help children succeed. I too want to take a brief moment and talk about recruitment, retention, promotion issues. Let me just say recruitment in general in law enforcement for all, whites, African Americans, Hispanics, is a challenge. I started my career and you might have 700 people show up for 15 jobs. Today we work hard to attract recruits to our department. It's not the way it was. It used to be people wanted a career in law enforcement. I don't find it to be as attractive with young adults today as it was when I started my career. That's another challenge. Youth today, it's a challenging job. It's shift work. You're working holidays, you're working weekends, and when you have the skills and the education, be qualified to be a law enforcement officer, you can find a job in the private sector that's going to allow you to work Monday through Friday and not have some of the aggravations and the hassles associated with police work. Another factor we have to overcome is we educate people to come into this profession and we talk to them about the job. We have to prepare them for what they're going to experience on the street. Kids that come from good homes and start a career as young adults in law enforcement sometimes haven't been exposed to some of the behaviors and the attitudes and just the sheer meanness that sometimes occurs out there on the street. We had one of our recruit classes and we were taking a tour of the sheriff's jail. And we had a female officer who was taking this new class through, and a few people said some ugly things to some of our cadets. And one of the female cadets was just shocked and appalled by the behavior and the way she was talked to. And the officer looked over at her and said, "You're just going to have to toughen up because you have not heard anything that you're going to hear on the street." The real world is kind of tough and mean out there, and officers have to be able to bring compassion to this job. And that's what we look for, is compassionate people that want to make a difference in this city that they serve in, make that kind of a difference, and yet still be tough enough to know that they're going to be exposed to some difficult situations. I just want to share that with you. It's difficult. I will tell you, law enforcement requires people to come to this profession that have a heart for it. Because of the things I just described to you, if you don't have a heart for it, you will not overcome those kinds of things, and it weighs on you heavily. And there's a whole scientific research on police cynicism, how people lose their hearts for this job, they get burnt out, and how we in law enforcement have to work to ensure that people don't lose their faith in terms of what they're doing. I have to give credit to Mayor Terry Bellamy and the members of council. We're looking at a number of issues as far as recruitment, going as far as realizing we need to touch children at a much younger age if we're going to recruit them into law enforcement. And so there's a lot of programs going on. Mayor Bellamy wants to revamp our youth program this summer to reach the youth, to mentor to youth in a way. We're looking at a junior Citizens Police Academy, the same kinds of things. A youth camp that we've done before, Sergeant Quentin Miller wants to put that together. Again, teaching young children what respect's all about, respecting one another, things that we're working on there. We're looking at reestablishing the DARE program and tying into that what's known as GREAT, Gang Resistance Education Training. The mayor's referred to it as growing our own, reaching out and touching youth at a younger age, steering them away from trouble, mentoring to them, and helping them so they don't get involved in criminal activity, don't get involved in illegal drugs and activities like that will preclude them from having a career in law enforcement. So those are some of the initiatives that we're doing with that. We really emphasize the need for community-oriented policing, building relationships with citizens. That's very, very important. And we want to reach out. We go to predominantly minority colleges and we try to recruit. We go into the neighborhoods and recruit. We go to the military and recruit. And I will tell you that our focus is on minorities and women. Our focus is on that, I can guarantee you. We're looking at a lot of incentives for recruitment. Signing a relocation bonus. We're looking at educational opportunities. We're looking at housing opportunities in partnership with the school system, quite frankly. Looking at things that we can do so that we can attract men and women to this profession and live in this community as they serve this community. I want to close with a plea to all of you in this room and as you move through the community to help us. And that's to help us to recruit more men and women, minorities particularly, into our police department. Help us do that. And we need you and would ask you to help us mentor. I would gladly accept you to reach out to me and help us mentor to the men and women we recruit to the department, mentor to minorities that are coming up and may have an interest in law enforcement or trying to help us instill that interest in law enforcement, and quite frankly, mentor to our existing officers in terms of promotion and working to help them develop the skills, the interest, and ability for the challenges of being a leader in law enforcement. I look forward to a continuing dialogue. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Carl Mumpala.
What a precious opportunity, and I'm glad to be here. I didn't think I would be. When I got here this morning, I was looking forward to a day of platitudes, a day of excuses, a day of dishonesty, if you will. But so far, that hasn't been the case, and I'm glad to see it. I'm looking forward to how we're going to turn some of these great thoughts into action at the end of the day. In 1972, I found myself in a village in Vietnam, in the mountains of Vietnam, called Pleasurang, alone. I did have a Montagnard interpreter with me. It was an accident. I wasn't supposed to be there alone. I was well armed with everything but intelligence, maturity, and experience. While I was there, a Vietnamese plane flew over and threw a smoke grenade into the village. It went through the roof. This was one of my first and most powerful exposures to discrimination. The interpreter I was with and some of the villagers quickly went into the hooch and kicked the grenade out and stopped the fire. I asked him what that was about, and he said, well, we're lucky, actually. Before you Americans came, when the Vietnamese pilots went out and they couldn't find a target on their way back, they would drop their leftover ordnance on top of our village. Now they just harass us. I asked him how he felt about that, and he said something that stuck with me ever since then. I'm okay. Our future is in our hands. A wise man, teaching a young man a lot. We abandoned that village shortly thereafter. The Vietnamese continue to this day to discriminate against those folks. And of course, at that time, they were fighting against the enemy on both sides. I'll never forget that man. So what is our reality with law enforcement in the black community? We are failing. Simply that. We are failing. And by the way, I resolved before I came today that I was going to be direct and candid. It will require some patience and indulgence. I don't mind the challenge, but I hope you'll try to help me do what I'm trying to do. Neon lights point to a 24-hour open-air drug market in most of our public housing developments in many of our poor and vulnerable neighborhoods. Neon lights point to the fact that a lot of our people, especially older people, are living in fear, afraid to come out of their houses. Neon lights point to the fact that a lot of our children, too many of our children, are being corrupted by exposures to role models provided by dealers, drug users, and their protectors that corrupt these children for a lifetime. By the time the average child goes to school, it is too late. I'm a psychologist, and I can tell you that most of what we are is formed in the first 5 years. The damage to their hearts and minds is done by the time they are 5. We spend the rest of our days trying to play catch-up while they leak pain from those broken hearts and minds. So what is broken? We have a dropout rate, and I think this is an interesting coincidence for black males that approximates, hard to get hard figures, 70%. It's also true that approximately 70% of those black males come from homes where there's no father. And it's a heck of a coincidence that 70% of the people that we have in our prisons are also black males. That's a horrific set of statistics that condemns a lot of us. We have problems with far too many of our children in the black community coming from fatherless homes. We have far too many people in public housing that are not working by choice. And then far too many people who are working and struggling to overcome impossible obstacles. Gene Bell this morning articulated that well. Working and working hard, but it's next to impossible to do it on $6, $7, $8 an hour. We have diversity in Asheville. We have black dealers primarily, white users primarily, and Hispanic distributors primarily. That's not the kind of diversity we need. Our police, I've said it out loud, I'll continue to say it until I believe it's different. I believe that we have to match the creativity, enthusiasm, and persistency of those who traffic in hard drugs, either as dealers, users, or as protectors, or we are not going to win, and I do not believe we're there yet. We have a court system designed for 1980, functioning in the year 2007. They have neither the space, nor the technology, nor the manpower, or really anything else they need to hold people accountable. By the time our court system, this is one of the main reasons we have so many jails. By the time our court system holds people accountable, it's too late. They're career criminals. By the time we pin people down, you have to get arrested and convicted for dealing crack cocaine usually 3 or more times before you have any jail time. Jail is not the answer. That's a representation of our failure. Accountability in some form is the answer, and our court system and criminal justice system is failing miserably on that basis. I will challenge, I think other people, I was delighted to hear it this morning, the black hip-hop culture where women are sexy toys, men are encouraged to be violent, immature boys. That is not a bridge to functionality, to happiness, to a future. And we have to start challenging that. I don't care how exciting, fun, stimulating, or entertaining it is. It is doing horrific damage to our people. We have a drug culture throughout our society that says, if you feel bad, I'm a psychologist, if you feel bad, take a pill for it. It's not that simple. We cannot use pills to walk around God and our own personal accountability. There's more to the deal than just chasing symptoms. We have to address the underlying problems. And then we also have, I think, in our community, a corruption of complacency. We do a heck of a lot of talking, a heck of a lot of hand-wringing, but not near enough doing. So what do? And I'll try to quickly close. We have to begin holding everyone accountable. I am nauseated by our tendency, and I'll use that word, to point the finger at the next guy. I can't do this because the courts don't do that. I can't do this because the police don't do that. I can't do what I'm supposed to do because the city council doesn't do this. I can't do what I'm supposed to do because the community or the neighbors or the culture doesn't do what it's supposed to do. All of us are right. Every one of us are right. But we have to quit pointing the finger out there and take the finger and point it here. I am going to take care of my part now. If not me, who? If not now, when? We have to hold us all accountable, and that includes me. We need black leadership. There is a disturbing lack of black leadership in this community. I will say to you, and I will offer this challenge, there are better people to be trying to do something about our hard drug problem in this community than a skinny, middle-aged conservative Republican. And that's the situation that I find myself in, and I need some friends. Aristotle challenged us to reach for something called virtue. He said we all have emotions and we all have a mind. Virtue is optional, and it is virtue that helps us take those emotions that come out of here and those thoughts that come out of here and those events that come at us and weigh it all out and try to find a place on the road, not in the ditches, that takes us to a better place. We have far too many of us who lay virtue aside and accept the disturbing damage of the ditches. We have to challenge one another to reach for something more virtuous. We have to stop the recruitment efforts of an open-air drug market. I would like to give tremendous credit to Asheville City Council for offering this challenge and policy to our police chief and city administration, and in turn, thanks to them for being willing to embrace it. We're going to stop our open-air drug market. Why? Because it's recruiting people to be dealers, to be users, to be protectors. It's corrupting our children. We have to drive it underground. We're not going to eliminate our drug problem, but we can sure eliminate the recruitment initiatives. We have a community now that is more effective at recruiting drug dealers than it is police officers. And that's wrong. And finally, I'll say that I completed the biography of Malcolm X, Alex Haley, recently. And that man lived a corrupt life for the early part of his life. If he didn't touch the door of evil, I don't know who did, by his own admission. But he reached for something deeper. He reached for that word virtue. He reached for the word accountability. And he said something. He said to his people, the black people, that we cannot continue living and thinking like victims. We cannot continue to blame others for our limitations and liabilities and failures. We have to recognize that we must embrace what we can control and let go of that which we cannot. And I would suggest to you that the black community needs to let go of that concept of victimization and embrace this gentleman's construct. They killed him for it, but he was right. And I hope we can try to challenge ourselves to get to that higher place that he was aiming for. It's my pleasure to be with you all today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jan Davis.
It's always difficult to follow my good friend and colleague Carl. I just love to listen to him talk, and he says a lot of really good things, and I think he's been really direct, very straight. He said some things that I think we've come here to hear, and I appreciate those things. 35 years ago, when Al Whitesides and I were in JCs together, Mr. Beck, I got involved in volunteering at Craigie Prison. And I spent a lot of hours behind those bars. And frankly, I was appalled then at the disproportionate number of black inmates compared to white. And I think from what we've heard today, we're still appalled. And it's regrettable. I agree with my colleague about the desire to stop the open-air drug market. But I don't really feel like that's as achievable as we would like for it to be. I really feel like that we have indeed committed a great deal of assets to it, and we're going to continue to do that. But I think until you break up concentrated poverty and we deal with the issues that we heard in the education portion this morning, we're always going to be faced with those things. So I think it's a holistic approach, and I think that we have to do all of it. It's not cheap. It comes with a high price, and I think that this city council is willing to step forward a good bit. We've done those things. We've tried to encourage participation in our police department by raising the pay. We were woefully and still are woefully inadequately paying our officers. We have started a program that we are going to. I pray that we're going to continue to where that we get our officers to a rate of pay that's commensurate to other cities in the state. And it still doesn't address how we get minority representation in the police department. In 1999, there was a great effort made to move away from the civil service system in Asheville, and we did that. It's enabled us to recruit and have a department that's a great deal more like the makeup of the community itself. Since Chief Hogan's been here, he's been very active in trying to work toward achieving the promotions that we would hope would happen. They are, at this time, we are using the 4 guiding principles of the police department, and they're very good. You can find them on our website. But we use that as a basis for promotion, and then we actively work to recruit minority members to come aboard into our academies and work very hard for that. It's difficult to get people, after what the chief just said a moment ago, the lifestyle that you live as a police officer is very difficult, requires a special person. It's hard to compete with the bling-bling, the hip-hop culture to make being a police officer the desired job. So I think that's one of the things we have to do as a community. We have to embrace the police department, show the people that there is an opportunity there and that it is made for those special people that want to be a part of it. I think it's important to note that the chief has, during his time here, and I think he was a very good hire for this community as far as working toward a very professional department. We've had a number of promotions. Regrettably, and I try to attend all those promotions as a member of council. I think that's one of the real special parts of the job, is to be able to see these people and encourage them. And I've been to the promotions, and we don't see a lot of black police officers moving forward. We have some pretty good diversity, but not to the degree we need. And that's something that's heavy on the heart of the community. I hear it from different places. I hear it from officers. I hear it from members of the community. I think that the chief is very concerned with that. I think we want to look very deeply at why that's happening. He, in fact, has changed our testing policy to make it a little different. There was a problem with understanding the standardized tests throughout the country. It's a cultural breakdown, and he recognized that. We've made some changes that direction. I really feel like that we're on track to seeing more promotions of the black officer as we move forward. I hope that the community will be patient as that occurs. That's and if we don't do it well, then the community needs to say that. They need to come forward and say, what can we do? What can we do to help this situation? I think we have a willing group of people. Sometimes it doesn't happen as quickly as we need it to. But a lot of things have been said. I won't take a lot more of the time of the audience. We were challenged to be brief, and I don't think we've been particularly, but there's been a lot of good things said. And I think that we need to all work together to work toward breaking up the concentrated poverty. I think we need to work very diligently to end the open-air drug market. I think that's drugs are just at the bottom of so many crimes in this community. We haven't a choice but to do that. But we also have to encourage people to take a part of their community and encourage young people to do the right things, to look for to go to work in a situation that's good and honorable, and we need to treat those police officers with the honor that they truly deserve. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your patience. We're going to have 2 more speakers. This is part of the youth movement here. This is 2 of our students who were going to talk this morning, and then Don Locke just shut them out. And I noticed that 2 of the students is crying, and I decided to invite them to, I'm joking, Don. But we're going to hear from 2 of the UNCA students, and when the call here is for leadership. Here, I think we have 2 young leaders here. So Anita, do you want to go first? And then, okay. Anita Okadiko.
I'm going to try to be brief here. Keep it try. But I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York. And everybody says Brooklyn's larger, but the same thing that happens in Brooklyn happens in Nashville, happens in Milwaukee, Atlanta, Ames, just several places I have been. I've been all over the country. But my first encountering with law enforcement was when I was at the age of, I believe it was 13. My brother and I were walking home from our Boy Scout meeting from church, and he told me, look over there, that car is following us. And the minute I looked, the cops jumped out the car and threw us up against the gate and, oh, you fit the description. And basically, to me, they were just telling me everything I was wearing. But that's just basic to me. But as a youth, not a youth, but as a young man right now, what I'm just speaking for us as in general, the problem with the law enforcement is not really law enforcement, it's the fact of the youth, young men in this nowadays, we don't trust, I can't say we, but there's like a fear of the police officers. And one of the things I felt that I heard are good things that we need to support and it needs to be more so implemented is the programs that they have to come inside the community and work with these youths at a younger age and to break down that fear that we have because, you know, to me, honestly, the drug dealers are doing a better job recruiting us than education is because everybody blames rap music, but really, if you really listen to the lyrics of rap music, you know, I'm going to quote a rapper that I saw when I was younger, Biggie Smalls. He's saying if he wasn't in the crack game, he'd probably have a key knee deep if he wasn't in the rap game, he'd probably have a key knee deep in the crack game because the streets is a short stop. You either sling a crack rock or you have a wicked jump shot. And that's basically it for us as black. That's what we feel as our options. You know, we have this education forum, but we have to realize why education is so important because if we blow off education and we're just dealing with sports, if we don't make it in sports, only thing left is crack. It's selling drugs. And black people as a whole, we have a fascination with expensive things, and we're not that patient of going the route of education to get to that route. You know, it's saddening to hear. I went home this Christmas break, and one of the kids I played basketball with in junior high school, he plays with DePaul. One of our teammates, he played basketball as well. And he's back in Fort Greene Projects selling crack. So there goes what Biggie Smalls was saying. If you don't have it in basketball and sports, you have to resort to drugs. And it shouldn't be like that. And it should be, I just feel that we need to catch them at a younger age because now drug dealers are getting smarter than us. You know, they getting them at a younger age. And I see when I go home, I see a lot more of the younger people, 12, 10 years old, standing on those corners. So we need to get out there and bridge the gap between the law enforcement and the community. You know, it has to go to back in the days. I heard all the people say back in the days they knew all the police officers. You know, they came, sat, ate dinner with them. We need to go back to that because I think that was more effective and that will eliminate more of the fear that we have, because I'm going to be quite honest and frank with you. If I was getting anything, the last people I would call is the police. You know, I've been searched, and I drive my car costs $800. My car has been searched 3 times. You know, it just goes to tell you, you know, what you can blame the rap music for is the stereotypical aspect of it. Because of what rap is doing, they just making money just like everybody else. But the way they do it, you have to be able to tell the youth what's real and what's fake. Because I know the rap industry pretty well because I'm from that area. And a lot of the stuff that they're talking about is not even real. So we have to be there to tell them that this is not real and this was real and this was not. And because of that, you have people dressing this way. And there's a reason why I can't wear certain things without getting harassed. So I just avoid them, but other people feel as they right, and I don't blame them. But I think that's what we need to do as a whole is to try to eliminate that fear and to show the youth the outcomes, you know, because the one thing that I think was very successful is my church. When I was there as well, when I was 13, they took me to Rikers Island. I was like, why are you taking me to Rikers Island? I'm not no bad kid or anything, but that experience in that correctional facility, talking to the inmates, the young inmates, made me that day decide that that's someplace I would never be. So if you start taking more of these youth at a younger age into these correctional facilities, talking to these inmates and seeing the outcome of that crack game they want to do or education, I think they'll make a better choice just by that experience right there. Thank you.
Our last speaker we had to get, Jason Jackson. And then get ready for your questions because we'll go immediately to that. So the people with the microphones, where are they? Who's got microphones here? That wasn't a rhetorical question. Who has microphones here? Well, someone had better get microphones. They're over here? Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Jason Jackson.
Sorry about that. I'm going to try to be very brief, too. I'm also a product of the New York City public school system and neighborhoods. I grew up in the South Bronx. And I've had a chance to see a good bit of violence, amongst, people that live in the community, as well as violence against police officers and police officers against people in the communities. And I just find it quite awkward that the same people that are hired to protect me, I'm afraid of. It always baffles me that, every time I see someone walking with a badge and a gun, that I automatically just clam up. And why do I feel so insecure around a police officer if they're supposed to protect me? Is it because I'm black? Is it because of the way I dress? Is it because of my age? What is it that makes me feel like every time I see an officer, I'm getting ready to be a victim of brutality or harassment? As far as drugs go, everybody that I've known has had some sort of relationship with drugs or a drug dealer, or, just been fascinated with, getting that fast money, getting that fast cash. And I don't know, I guess I could feel ashamed to give, a sort of testimonial, but when I was 13 years old, I sold drugs for 2 months. It wasn't a big deal, but, I tried it. I tried it just to see what it was like. It was hard to look up to anybody else as opposed to the guys that are on the corner hanging out all the time. And drugs are a problem in our communities. But how do we get rid of it? It's always going to be there. Always. So I guess here today, we have to figure out what it is exactly that we can do to begin to bridge the gap between young men like myself and our law enforcement agents. Can they feel connected to us? Can they look at me and just simply see me as a young man just on my way to school? And I can't lie, sometimes I break the law. I remember one time after track practice, Anita and I hopped the train.
we got tickets for it, though.
And, police officer pulled us over. He was in the station. And, it was a group of us. And he said, you guys didn't pay your fare, that's fare evasion. And he started asking us, what's your name? How old are you? What are you doing in Queens? Where you going? We were scared. We were afraid. We had another friend who was on the other side of the turnstile. And he's like, are you with these guys? He says, yeah. And he automatically puts his hands up. And we're all carrying book bags. We're coming from track practice. And he's holding his hands up. He's like, is it okay if I come over? He's like, yeah, come over. Are you sure it's all right? And this is the type of environment that we live in. And that's everywhere. It's everywhere. And you still see it in the news. Just a couple of months ago, another man was shot down. How many bullets? Anybody knows how many bullets that man was hit with? One man. And how many officers? No, I can't lie. I'm pretty sure the officers are afraid for their lives too. But sometimes you really have to take a step back and look at the situation and look at what everybody's dealing with. I don't know what it takes to become a police officer, but you have to take some sort of mental exam. We have to see what your personality type is like. We have to see if you are racially biased. So I hope that we can all come here today and try to find a solution to all of the problems that we're dealing with today. Education, law enforcement, housing, healthcare. These are all the issues that not only, minorities, so-called minorities are dealing with, but every single American is dealing with. And we all have to take a step back and look at ourselves and say, what can I do to change this? This is supposed to be the land of opportunity. This is supposed to be a free country. But I don't see that. And it's hard. I'm only 21 years old. 21. And I should see my life in a whole different fashion. But every day, I look in the mirror and I have to tell myself, you can do it. You're going to make it another day. Thank you.
Okay, we have people with microphones, and let's have some of the questions here. Remember, what we're looking for are benchmarks and possible solutions. A year from now, if we have this same meeting, what are the standards we're going to be applying? How do we know we're having some success or whether we continue to fail here? First question over here, please.
Thank you. I'm Alfonso McGlennon. I'm pastor of St. James AME Church here in Asheville. And my first question is, how can we say that the criminal justice system is failing when we look at the statistics? It seems that business is real good, real good. So perhaps we need to change our perspective on that. How pervasive is this issue of police officers who are not prepared for the real job of policing? And what effect do you think that has on situations that they encounter in the streets? And does that unpreparedness perhaps cause or lead to some of the escalated issues that we see?
If I might, what do you mean by the real job of policing?
Well, as was stated, there was an example of a cadet who was taken through a facility and was really taken aback by the language. Okay. So when those unprepared officers, apparently some of those unprepared officers have to deal with real street situations, then does that factor into some of these situations that escalate? Mm-hmm. My other final question is, do we really, really believe that with as big of a business as the criminal justice system is, that the stockholders, that the manufacturers of prison beds, and that everyone else involved in this system is really going to let this business go by the wayside? Do we really believe that?
Yeah, please.
I would be glad to answer the one question about how we prepare officers that maybe have not been exposed to some of the difficulties in the street. Part of our training is just to do just that. It's to weed out folks that aren't well suited for the profession. We go through an extensive 14-week basic law enforcement training program. Then we take them through about an additional 5 weeks of additional training in our department. And at the whole time, as we conduct that department, we're looking at their mindset. We're looking at how they evolve in terms of that training. And then finally, we put them on the streets for another 12 weeks with another police officer. I can assure you by the time we turn them loose, they understand the real world. Also, I can tell you the supervisors on the street are very aware of the new officers that are on the street, and they pay a lot of attention to them. They're close to them. They come by on a lot of calls to make sure they're handling themselves appropriately. It is a process of learning. But I can tell you that throughout any academy we have, either it's a decision of the cadet or it's a decision of the department at times that someone's not well suited for the job. And we have those discussions with the men and women that come through the academy. And when they feel they're not well suited, or we see they're not well suited in terms of their handling the stress and the responsibilities and the guiding principles, the standards that we hold near and dear to us, we have those conversations. And they either leave voluntarily or we take them out, because we do not want to put anybody on the street that does not have the maturity, the sensitivity that's necessary to do this job.
When I asked you about the question about real police work, I was thinking you were picking up on what Jason had said in terms of his fear every time he sees a police officer. I thought what you were talking about is the kind of connection to a community as opposed to going in, freeze, and arresting people. Because I think there's two different ways of policing. I mean, one is the arrest model, where you go in, you point a gun, lay on the ground, hands up, whatever, and you arrest. And the other one, what he was talking about, was building some kind of trust. I think it was Anita who said that the days when officers knew people in the community, they knew families here. And I guess I was thinking that to me would seem to be real police work. Real police work would not only be willing to be able to put up with catcalls and insults, but it would be having a connection to a broader community here. And that to me is what I would define as real police work.
Well, my question was to the former.
Yes, yes.
Because let's face it, real militia work has to do with the front line, being bullet stoppers, if you will, using an Army term. So that's where my question is coming from. And perhaps, again, does that connect us to some larger issues?
Yeah, okay.
Just a little bit more, a little different dynamic to that. Chief Hogan's responsible for those patrol functions at the Sheriff's Office. We're also responsible for those officers that work in detention. And I think we set a record a few weeks ago by having a one-day turnaround for an officer coming into detention that we hired to give them an orientation on what being a detention officer is all about. His supervisor called back and talked with my major and said, this young man says he can't stay because he's got convictions. And the major said, do you mean that he's been charged criminally? He said, no, he's got convictions. He can't deal with what goes on in the housing units. And it kind of came across a little funny, but it is very sad. We have a tremendously hard time recruiting for both sides of the house and enforcement, both detention and for police officers now, because a lot of people do not seem to have in the numbers the heart for public service that they used to have. And that detention officer job is tremendously hard. The only thing that separates them from those 50 inmates on that housing unit is a line drawn on the floor. And they have to use a tremendous amount of empathetic plus personal and leadership skills to do well in that environment. And it's tough. It's pretty tough to hire and retain those folks. So that is a challenge that we face. And I appreciate Reverend McGlynn asking the question.
Yeah, Anita?
I'd like to make a comment real quick. As far as the jails not needing to be built, but I think as a whole, as a society, if we take away the labels, when inmates get out, as mentioned before, they have 2 weeks to get back into society, but really society really doesn't want them because they label them, and it's hard for them to find jobs if they have to, on applications, you know, if you're ex-con, you have to check this box, and it's really hard for them to get back into the flow of society. And the only place that really wants them back is the place that they just left from, or what they was doing that got them into jail. So if we as a community have open arms to them and give them a opportunity to stay away from that, then I think there'll be less people re-entering jail.
Other takers on the panel here, do we take another question? Taylor?
I'm ready right here.
Before
we move on, Mr. Beck.
No, we're going to have a comment here, then here, and then we'll go over here. Go ahead. Yes.
We're still on this question.
We're still on this question. So we'll stay with this question, and then we'll move on. So go ahead.
Okay, I was going to just address the component about corrections being big business.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it costs. The Department of Corrections annual operating budget is in excess of $1 billion a year, but 70% of that is for staff. The average daily cost of keeping an inmate incarcerated in this state is about $67 and some change. Now, nobody is out there lobbying to keep prisons filled. Okay? Okay, well, you and I have a right to disagree. And I'm down there, and I see it. But the fact is when they come back, and when they're released, and there's no opportunities, this is what's fueling it. It's not because somebody's down there creating the traps. The traps are here when they get out, if they can't get a job, if they can't find a place to stay, they can't earn a living wage, yeah, they're going to revert back to what they do. Now, there are people who make a good living providing certain services and certain materials to the corrections industry. But I don't see them as being the ones who are causing all of the problem.
Okay. Carl?
It would be my suggestion that most of us are apprehensive in the presence of someone who has a gun and a bulletproof vest and the capacity to arrest us. Now, there may be degrees of fear, and if you've been discriminated against, it would aggravate that fear. But I know I'm afraid in proximity to an officer when they pull me. I know my heart rate goes up because they have a lot of power. Just as I'm afraid when I pull up to a drug dealer in public housing and he comes up to my car. He has a lot of power. In terms of benchmarks, our challenge from the moderator, I'd like to say one that I hope a year from now that we'll be able to say we've had success with is we have largely eliminated, not our drug problem, but our open air drug market, the recruitment stations we have. I appreciate something Mr. Beck said about jails that I agree with. The more we focus on things we cannot control, merchants benefiting from selling jail beds versus things we can control, trying to create bridges for inmates who get out of jail and come back to this community, the more we're going to continue to fail. So I hope another benchmark will set. Is there something I can do to...
Don't make any sudden movements.
Is somebody sabotaging me? I hope another benchmark will set is that this community is going to take responsibility for when our people go to jail and come back. This year, we're going to look to develop some programs to help them bridge themselves back into the community so they don't go back again.
Okay.
What would happen? What would happen if we could purchase some houses or purchase some free housing for those folk coming into the police department to live in the community, so they won't seem to be coming in as a force, but live and touch and breathe with folk every day, and that be a requirement of them becoming officers? What would happen after a year if we did that in some of the neighborhoods we're having some of the problems with? So folks get to know folks get to understand folks and realize we're all in this together and build some community. What would happen if we could do something like that?
And to build off of what we said this morning in terms of trying to be imaginative in terms of attracting teachers here, you would try to get more of a community-based thing. Let me ask Bill, please.
I would just tell you that there is some plans afoot within the city to look at developing rental housing and developing home ownership opportunities for teachers and police to live in our community. There are a lot of Asheville police officers based on the salary, and a lot of city employees that cannot afford to live in the city. And they are forced to live out beyond the city limits. It's our desire, I know it's the desire of the mayor and council and the city staff, to create opportunities and have a wage structure that the men and women that serve in law enforcement and work for the city could afford to live in the city. But a lot of them live outside the city. They get more bang for their buck in terms of the quality of the home they can afford. But I will tell you, there are plans afoot right now to create some rental housing as we recruit new people, to give them an opportunity to live in this community, and also some home ownership opportunities directly linked to living inside the city of Asheville to be a part of the community. I understand what you're saying, Bob, about actually being in the neighborhoods. I don't think we can force people to live in a particular location, but we're trying to create incentives to do that.
May I? But we have too many officers who have formerly lived in these communities, have relationships with the people in the community. We've had them, and right up until the time it's time for them, that position that they have created, one day before they could occupy that position according to the old civil service rule, then you take them out. So the thing is, let's stop playing games. First of all, we don't have hardly anybody in the sheriff department nor the police department that look like us. That's the first problem. We have We have talked about housing and so forth. I've been here 30 years, we've talked about it. We are just as worse off now as the first time that I picked up the torch with the NAACP in 1987. We are worse off today than we were in 1987 when it comes to the community of black people having a relationship with the establishment. Now, first of all, since he's been superintendent, we do have an opportunity for young men, young women who are incarcerated to get their GED. They can get college, or they can get some type of skill, trade. Now, it's in place. It's up to us to make sure that they are AB Tech, taking these classes, or AB Tech is going there at Craggy to give them these classes. Then we have put into it's already in place. Your Asheville branch NAACP, under the Empowerment Act, have made it possible for them to start learning how to give bids and be a part of the bid process with the Department of Transportation. They cannot hold a felony against you when they open their bids. So there is a way for reentry. We need to educate. But first of all, there need to be some true sensitivity about the condition that we live in. Don't tell me because you spend a night or a weekend in public housing. I came out of Southtown Housing Project in Birmingham, Alabama. Where you come from and where you're going is two different things. And the other side, no, hold a minute. It's not about applause. It's about true policing. And you cannot continue to tell me that we are not qualified to be officer in the Asheville Police Department. I am tired of that excuse. I'm tired of test after test after test. If I don't do well on a test, watch me and see can I perform. So it's time to do something. Either do it, or city council, you're sitting there, let's get somebody else.
Over here.
Hello, my name is y'all had to come get in line. Jacqueline Hallam. And one of the things that Secretary Beck said was the $100 million that was spent building the 5 prisons. This summer, I've had, by Title VII cuts, from the federal administration, the summer programs. And so I have about 200 less slots for students to go to during the summer. So the dollars for prevention, so to speak, being proactive, to try to instill students the values and skills not to go to prison, those dollars are being cut. So all the Title VII have either been reduced or totally eliminated. And then the money for building prisons has increased. And so I'm not only talking to the panel, but to the community. What do we do? Will the new administration put the money back? But it seems when you're saying the lobbying is not happening, it's happening in different ways. So someone's not actively saying, I'm lobbying, I want you to come here. But when you cut the programs and the things on the other side that will make a difference, and then you increase the dollars for the penal system, there's some indirect lobbying.
Well, now when I don't know, that money is taken from one program to another. It has to do with how the project is delivered and how it's financed, how the debt capacity of the state, a whole number of different issues. But hear me, I subscribe to what you're saying, and I firmly believe that prevention is going to be the best approach to solving our problems. But in the meantime, what I know is that the inmate population in this state is growing by 1,000 inmates every year. We have constitutional requirements in terms of providing safe, secure, and humane conditions of confinement. If North Carolina does not invest in having enough capacity to hold that population, then we're back to where we were 10 years ago, where we would have to be sending inmates to Rhode Island, Oklahoma, Texas, and other places. And I'll admit they brought back some bad habits when they came back. And so we can't have it both ways. But I think that the fact that we're here today and we're talking about this is a good place to be. Yeah, we may not have made a lot of progress in 30, 40 years, but we're still engaged, and we haven't written it off. And I think that you're going to see that there's going to continue to be an emphasis on transition, reentry, and prevention. Because, nobody believes that we can continue to spend the kind of money we're spending on these prisons. It's just a bad business decision. But in the meantime, until we get some things going, people and the population is still going up. We've got to have the capacity.
Go ahead, please.
I just want to say that it's sort of unfortunate that we have a panel of law enforcement and prisons, but we don't have business owners and people who can help deter this business. We need to have an economic base to help solve this problem, to train these kids who don't want to go to college, but may be a good plumber. Apprenticeships programs in these Pisgah View. We need trainings inside the housing development with business inside the housing development. So not only does the kid see the drug dealer, he sees a black owner of a business too, and he chooses that option. Do I want to be a drug dealer, or do I want to go work in a barbershop today? And if there's no options, he's going to go to the drug dealer. So, I applaud the effort of the people who organize this, but until we have business owners, trainers, people willing not to just talk, but to say today, okay, I have an apprenticeship program for some youth, send them my way, and let them be ex-offenders. And until we have that, we just talking, we not sweating.
Thank you. Harry? Harry?
Me?
Yeah.
I just want to give.
Are we not going to respond to that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know. By all means, I didn't know there was. Please.
We have a program. A gentleman named Shad Waters and myself. I don't know who posed that comment or question in Shiloh that we started a couple of months ago called Job One, WON, and it's where a group of community volunteers and Mr. Waters leading it, myself and a gentleman named Don Boone. Working with him, and we do 4 things. We try to connect drug dealers with coaches, and we have coaches, and we have 3 drug dealers. We try to help match them with a job. We meet with them once a week in kind of a support group, all of us together, including myself, and then we look toward educational opportunities. Now, Shiloh's where we're starting, and it's small. They're just 3 guys. But if your community has an interest in learning more about how you can get up out of your chair and stop talking with words and start doing something with action, I would offer you the challenge. Give me a call and come spend part of your Thursday evening with us, and we'll help you get started in your neighborhood trying to create a bridge for the dealers from the street to a decent job. And we have the jobs. I've met with SIBO and other businesses, and they're willing, if we can bring a young man to them who's trying, they're willing to provide the jobs. And it'd be my pleasure to work with you to help other people.
Dan?
Yeah, I am a small business owner, and did that by myself. I started out unloading tires 37 years ago, and grew that to a small, prosperous business. We employed 10 people downtown, and pretty effective. On the AB Tech's Board of Advisors, and one of the real problems we have over there, their automotive department doesn't get enough people to apply to put into the marketplace. And guidance counselors in high schools do not do a good job in heading people into trades and professions that require just technical skills. Did you know that the average graduate of the AB Tech's automotive department starts at anywhere from about $40,000 to $50,000 right now? Now that will compete with drug money, but we don't do a good job of putting those kids in the right place. And I think that goes back to the education panel this morning. I really hope that someone from the education system's here to understand that if we can give people something that they want to do, that is good, then we're going to replace some of those bad things.
All right. Anyone else on the panel? We move over here. Leah? Go ahead.
Okay. I believe this panel is looking for solutions, and I think Mr. Beck may be able to answer this question. Are you looking for alternatives to incarceration, by which I mean community service and or restitution and so forth? And also, are you interested in restorative justice, which is the victim meeting with the offender?
Yeah, and also maybe Calvin, if you could comment. I mean, particularly you talked about your change from being a criminal defense attorney to now being judge, but I think that question was to you. Theotis?
Our justice system.
Closer, Calvin?
Yeah. It has sort of been cyclical in that it has evolved from rehabilitation to punishment to rehabilitation, and now we're in a punishment mode. Some crimes, because of structured sentencing, community service, and restitution, are not adequate under the chart. For instance, if you have no criminal history and you're charged with a Class I felony, writing a substantial bad check, or if you're charged with a Class H felony, possession with intent to manufacture, sell, or deliver, then under structured sentencing, you can get community service and some fines and costs and not go to prison. But that same person, if he commits an armed robbery or if he commits second-degree murder under structured sentencing, he cannot get just community service and probation, because that level of crime under the chart, the judge does not have discretion to give probation and community service and fine. He must give active time. The more serious the charge, the likelihood of probation and fines and costs is decreased. In terms of whether or not victims can meet with the perpetrators of crime, that is already happening. There is a right in Superior Court and in District Court, but particularly in Superior Court, if you are the victim of a crime, you have the right, and the District Attorney's Office has the obligation to let you know when your crime or your case is in Superior Court, to call you and give you an opportunity to be there, to have some say-so to the judge about what the punishment is, and to speak directly to the person who has harmed you. So that's already happening.
I'm not sure you're talking about restorative justice. You're talking about sentencing.
Well, you asked about the alternatives to incarceration, and I think that's what the judge was addressing. As to the restorative justice, we are not involved in any restorative justice activities. We've got a couple of proposals that we're currently looking at, and I don't know exactly what the outcome will be from those reviews at this point.
Question over here, please.
I would just like to make a comment. I know I'm not in church, but I first would like to thank God for this day and this opportunity. And I say that because I am a mother who experienced just about everything that you all have discussed on this day. My name is Priscilla, and I'm an upcoming author of A Mother's Cry, He's Still My Child. The book will be released March 11th. I'll be doing my book signing at the YMI Cultural Center. What I would like to suggest is for you all, I'm not going to say you all, each one of us, to remove the mask and search ourselves and ask ourselves, what is it that I haven't done to help a youth or a mother? What can I do to help a youth or mother? And we can't just jump over the mother or the parents and try to help a youth. We need to encamp ourselves around the mothers and empower them in how to deal with their children that are out of control. 10 years ago, my son decided to quit school. He quit school because he had been suspended so many times, so he was rejected back to the street. and he went to the street where he felt comfortable, and he said that he got in where he thought he fit in. So when he went to the street, there were the older men, the older drug dealers that used my 14-year-old to run their cars. And this mother screamed out for help all over Asheville, and none was available. So I would like to strongly suggest that while you sit here and discuss what we can do to help our children, our community, first let's start with helping the parents. Let's empower them. Let's give them what they need so that they can help you to help the children. And I'll sit down with this. Our children are our future. We're going to get older. You call them drug dealers, you call them high school dropout, you put the label on them. But as we grow older and look around, who are we going to have around us?
Yeah, thank you.
Is that a benchmark opportunity that sometime between now and this time next year that we will at least start some initiatives? I love what she said. The mamas need more attention and support. I think there are people that are trying to do that, but can we establish a benchmark to try more?
No, I'm with you. I mean, I think that would be good. I think right at the end, I'm going to be asking for 5 to 7 concrete proposals, and and we'll do that. Okay, Harry?
I just got a quick historical reference I want to make. My name is Harry Harrison. A couple of young men spoke about the fear of policemen. And I just want to put this in a context because the fear has been here for generations. It started when they started policing us from Africa with guns and chains and violence. And I can skip a whole generation and come up to the civil rights era where policemen were holding water hoses and sicking dogs on us and German shepherds. So it has a historical reference why we have a fear of those who have been selected to protect us. And we have to do something to eradicate that fear because it has perpetuated for centuries. And if you're jogging down the wrong street, and you could be a publisher of a newspaper, you could get arrested because you fit the identity. It's a casualty, and it's really quite injustice the way that we are treated, and we are asked to be sensitive. But when you look at the civil rights tapes, look and see who was perpetuating the crime. Look and see who held the water hoses and who held the dogs and who was being attacked. And yet we're supposed to look at those same individuals and say, they're here to protect our rights. There's something missing in this equation, and we really have to address this issue if we're really going to put a balance of justice within our communities. It's got to start, and we got to put people like us. We got to see people like us in responsible places, not only in justice, but in every area, housing and medical profession. We got to see us proportionately, not disproportionately, proportionately, so that we can remove that fear. So when there's no aspiration for someone to become a police officer, because those are the same ones that attacked my mama. That's the same one that attacked my daddy. You can see the scar on his arm from civil rights. So there is a reason for it, and we have not addressed that, but it's, again, traumatic.
Sir, may I ask you a question?
Yes.
You're talking about some things we can't control. What happened?
I'm just bringing in historical reference.
All right, I understand, but we can't control that. We can't directly control our police, or certainly the black community can't directly control our police. What can the black community do to address just what you're saying, that separation from the police? What can the black community do?
It's not just the black community. It has to come from the office.
Well, my challenge to you, though, is that's not something you have control over. I'm interested in, and if I may, I appreciate your patience with me. that those things we have direct control over give us the most potential to change our reality. What can the black community do to change that bad reality that you're describing?
When white America apologized for slavery and realized that they've done the black...
That puts it back in our hands. It puts it back in our hands.
So white European Americans repent for slavery.
That gives us
hold
the
on,
power.
both of you guys. Harry, would you like to answer the question in terms of...
I would like to answer that question. I would like to answer the question.
Well, let me ask Harry if he would first like to answer the question, and then you'll have a chance. Is there a response here, Harry?
There is a response.
Okay.
But you have to understand that years ago, and even in some black communities today, black people do police themselves. So it has not, and then the fear come in when there's someone from the outside come in, and then there's the prospect that you may be arrested for some false accusation, a false identity, or just driving while black. And so I know that within the black community there needs to be some calm, some peace. We're looking for things that other communities look for. You have to understand now that a lot of communities are not totally black. There's a lot of transparency that's happening over the decades that have changed the way America now lives. The living conditions are completely changed, and that's why people want gated communities. That's one reason they want gated communities. That means they want to keep someone out. But I really don't have a solution other than send somebody in our community that look like us.
Amen.
Okay.
That's the best answer I could give.
Okay, over here, please.
I wanted to address, in fact, what Harry was talking about as well.
Could you introduce yourself?
My name is Wayne Purcell.
Okay.
I am pastor of Word Made Truth Ministries.
Okay.
One of the things that I've noticed and I heard, especially coming from the Asheville Police Department and the Sheriff Department, in response to what Brother Harry is talking about, I recognize that there's some psychosocial issues that goes on between the law enforcement and the black community, and communities as a whole. And I've heard someone mention about open air drugs. If the situation is that prevalent and there's a natural fear between young African Americans and the police department or law enforcement in general, then, and we look at where all of this is coming from, we mentioned that there's a systemic effect. It starts with lack of education, one parent missing in the home, etc. Then it would seem to me that this being a great opportunity where we can come together and look at some networking solutions where the police department, the sheriff department, families can come together, meet at schools. If there's an open air drugs out at Pisgah or where the other places are located at, because there's a lot of good families there, good hardworking people who live there. We should have networks where the chief of police and Sheriff Duncan should be able to come to those communities, Pisgah, and sit down and try to find out why there's this fear that's prevalent amongst youngsters. Because I know I have it myself. I was pulled over one time by a police officer and ran up on the curve. I'm a good driver. But that's how messed up I was. But the point I'm making is that there has to be some sort of collaboration with the families, with the community, with police, with education, where we can come together either once a month or whatever from this meeting and start to meet and dialogue and find out what can we do to bridge this gap that exists between police and the African American community. And contrary to what has been said, we are targeted, and there is a problem. And when you look at crack cocaine and regular cocaine, there is a problem that we are being targeted, where you have kids going to jail doing all this time for crack cocaine in small amounts, where the regular cocaine, you know, these are things that says to me that we are being targeted. So it's not that we are saying we're victimized. Of course we're victimized. It's proof is there. But I'm not here to attack, and I'm not here to attack. What I am here to do is try to suggest some sort of linking, networking, where we can come together either as a group, we can meet, and I appreciate both the chief and Sheriff Duncan for allowing the ministers to come and sit down and to express this with them. So if we can take it the next step, I think we need to go to those communities, those so-called open-air drug communities, and let them show the faces of the, what's his name, Logan, Brother Logan. He ought to go down there as well and meet in those places, try to find some sort of agreement, some dialogue, where we can begin to work in a concerted effort to drop down this fear, this barrier. I think recruitment is great, but until we get to the psychosocial issues of why those problems exist between police officers and our communities, then we can hire all the blacks we want. We're still going to have that problem. And I thank you for your time.
All right, thank you for your comment here. Any comment from the...
I would just like to say, and I know that I would be delighted, and if the Ministerial Association would be the conduit to make this happen, I would love to have that opportunity to go into the neighborhood, sit down, have dialogue, and I'm sure that Mr. Logan, I know the sheriff would as well. We would love to have that kind of dialogue and work on these issues. And as I've said, I know when I met with the Ministerial Association, they were talking about the fear. There's not a person alive, myself included, that hasn't been pulled over and doesn't feel a little bit apprehensive. I'm a police officer, and I've been stopped before, and I feel apprehensive. It's just the nature of someone stopping you and making you uneasy about that and what you did, what's going on. You're feeling bad about it. What have I done? And all that. So I know the feeling. But I would love to have the dialogue, and I would look to the Ministerial Association to work with us in a way to set up these meetings and this communication. That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Chief, if I might, and I do appreciate it. I do think, though, and I do hope something comes of it. In terms of this fear of the police, if I may make an observation here, it seems to be that the people up here who are white, and I'll include myself, would say, well, all of us are nervous. I think what I'm also hearing with the mutterings and murmurings in the crowd, and also the comments made earlier, there's fear, and then there's fear. Okay, your car has been searched 3 times. Anita said, my car, I've been pulled over. My car has not been searched 3 times. It's worth about the same amount of money yours is, but it is. I have not had my entire car searched for 3 times. That to me is the difference. Please.
I would still pose the question to the black community that what can you do to address all of these issues? The more you focus on what these guys or those guys, whether they're here, there, or wherever, I think the more you limit your ability to stop the problem. That's why we're spinning our wheels. Everybody else is focusing on what everybody else needs to do instead of the things that we can do. One of those things that we can do is this coming Thursday, we're having a flashlight drug vigil on City County Plaza. We're asking everybody who's been touched or affected or cares about drugs to please come to City County Plaza, bring a flashlight. I'm bringing a giant searchlight. And at a certain time, we're starting at 6:30, and we need your support. And starting at 6:30 at a certain time, we're going to turn that searchlight on, and we're going to ask people who can't be there to go out on their porch in Asheville and take a flashlight and shine it up at the sky and symbolically say that we're going to stop the harm. We're going to start fighting back. It's a little thing, and I would be grateful for any support we can get from any church, any minister, any community member with an interest in the subject. Thank you, sir.
Moderator's prerogative, please, Keith.
I am so anxious. There's been a lot of discussion here
Loud.
about black responsibility and black accountability. I have heard no discussion today whatsoever about coming to terms with the past before we can move to the future. I have heard no discussion today about white people accepting responsibility for things like white privilege, white racism, and structural discrimination.
Amen. I think I just basically want to stress that Dr. Carl, that's a very good program that you're putting on, and you will get some people there. But our discussion, the subjects of this discussion, they're not going to come. And you keep posing the question, what can the black community do? It's not about what the black community can do. It's what our officials can do. The people of power, really hear me out. They're not going to come to you. There's a distrust. You wear a suit and a tie, you have a title, you have a position. These people are not going to come to you. You have to come to the communities. And like, you are the sheriff, correct? Chief. I'm sorry, I'm a visitor. But yeah, you have to get with these people. You have to come to the communities. And I just want to stress everybody stay committed, to wanting to work these problems out and getting together. We have a city hall here, correct? This is where meetings should go on. That's the reason why there is a city hall. City hall is there for everyone that is a part of the city to come and discuss what we can do to make Asheville a better city. So everybody has to stay dedicated to this.
I appreciate
community leaders, our officials in government positions, everybody has to stay committed to working on this problem. Like I said, some people are going to come, those that care, but we have to go there. We have to go there.
Go ahead, Al.
Yeah, Carl, I appreciate what you're saying, but what I want to see out of you and the rest of council is less grandstanding and start doing something. And by that I mean, let's talk about now. We're going to talk about how we can include the black community. Stop meeting behind closed doors and start including us in the meeting behind the closed doors where the decisions are made. Now, I've been in this community all my life, and I know the crap that goes on. And I know who plays the crap. But start being honest to us, and don't think you're fooling us with all this grandstanding.
Okay.
Now, when we talk about what happens when you pull over, I think most people in this community know who I am. But let me tell you what happened to me in 1988 that I always remember. And my wife Shirley was with me, and my young daughter Kim. And this what let me know, I don't care what you do or how recognized you are. When you're a black man in America, you're always going to be a black man. We left our house over on Hayth Drive, driving to another friend of ours' house. My young daughter said, "Look behind, Dad, it's all these police cars." I didn't pay any attention, I'm not doing anything. We cut through Memorial Mission Hospital, and the next thing I know is 3 cars in front of us, 3 behind us. This officer, a cowboy I call, got out, walked up to our car, and I said, "Officer, what's the problem?" He said, "Just stay in there, and I'll come back to you." So really, after about 10 minutes, that was it. For me, that was good. He said, "We knew of a drug pusher who gave me a song." And I said, "Look, arrest me or I'm leaving." Because he knew who I was when I left my house. In 30 seconds, they know your license plate and all. And what really got me with that was more than this. One of the officers who was in the car, I'd made a loan to 2 weeks.
Mr. Moderator, please. I want to thank that young man for his comments, and Mr. Whiteside, somebody I've appreciated for a long time. Mr. Whitesides, 2 years ago I started a program. It's funny, every time I do anything, I'm either running for office or grandstanding. I'm not running for office. You're stuck with me for another 3 years. 2.5 years ago, I started a program for public housing called For Our Kids. And I probably spend at least 20 hours a month, at least. Oh, please. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I did. Along with other members of council. May I? I spend probably 20 hours a month working on public housing issues. Every week on Thursday evening, I'm in Shiloh trying to make this job one thing. The point was raised, why don't you do something? I do. I spend probably about as much time in public housing as a whole lot of people in this room do. I'm in there all the time trying to figure out if our police try to do something. I do believe in doing something. I do believe in something more than talking. But again, my challenge to you, if Malcolm X were standing right here beside me, he would say, what can we do as the black community to fix our own problem and quit pointing the finger at people we can't control? But as long as we do that, we're going to lose.
Okay, over here, please, ladies and gentlemen, please. Yes. And then you. Okay.
My name is John Grant. I'm pastor of the Mount Zion Missionary Baptist Church here in Asheville. And I wanted to just address briefly this notion about solutions. Somebody made a quote this morning from the World Health Organization that described health as a state of physical, mental, and emotional well-being. What I was struck by when I heard that definition, and what I've been struck by today here, is that it leaves out the spiritual well-being of people. And how can you talk about the health of a community without talking about the spiritual health, the spiritual aspect? So on all of the panels here today, and I want to make it clear, I'm very appreciative of this effort today and what has been done here. I'm very appreciative of what I've heard. But there's a glowing omission, which to us is part of the problem. One of the solutions might be we are having worship service at 11 o'clock Sunday morning at 47 Eagle Street at Mount Zion Missionary Baptist Church. And the other churches are having worship services. One of the solutions might be for our people to start coming back to church, for one thing. Because what we have noticed is that there seems to be a correlation between this drifting away from the church and the increase with all of the problems that we are having. And that we need to get back to some of our virtuous and moral basis. But what I wanted to ask, and I don't want to pick on anybody, but what I was a little confused about Dr. Mumpower when he said in suggesting solutions, he said that the black community needs black leadership. And I'm really confused about what he means, because we have a mayor who's a black leader. We have Mr. Beck, who's sitting there, secretary of the Correctional Institution, who's a black leader. I think we have black leaders all through our community. So what I'm trying to understand, are we saying that these leaders we have, are you saying that the leaders we have don't count? Because I know that there are leaders throughout our community that's doing everything humanly possible, sincerely, honestly, to make a difference. And so when you say that we need black leaders, I was just a little thrown aback by that, and I just didn't know what you meant by that.
I mean very specifically. Thank you, sir, and I appreciate your comment, and I agree with you completely that the further away from God we walk, the more trouble we get into. I specifically believe that there is an absence of black leadership, and this is what I said, in addressing our drug problem. I do not see that leadership. I see black leaders in other areas. I see black leaders, very capable people, but I do not see it in terms of confronting the hard drug problem we have in this community that is taking so many people
Well, I would
down.
suggest, we would just suggest that you meet with some of us and we can introduce you to some of those leaders that you don't see.
Be my pleasure.
Okay,
Over here, please.
Hello, my name is Sharon Pitts, and I'm involved with mental health issues. I'm involved with mental health issues, and one of the reasons that our jails are overflowing and needing to be expanded is because across the state, hospitals are being closed down, and people are being pushed out. Mental health hospitals are being closed down, and people are being pushed back to their communities where there's no one there to receive them, to provide services. According to the U.S. Department of Justice's statistics, in our prisons, between 45% to 65% of inmates have persistent and serious mental illnesses. My question is, what can you tell the audience about the efforts of AP Tech, Mission St. Joe's Hospital, NAMI, the Voice on Mental Illness, the county and city police department, to look into the possibility to develop a CIT program, which is a jail diversion program based upon the Memphis model.
I can tell you that AV Tech and the Police and Sheriff's Department and a number of other citizens, NAMI, are working on a CIT program, and that's critical incident training for at least 25% of the police officers to have greater skills to intervene when we're dealing with an emotionally disturbed individual. This is intended to reduce the chance of force or deadly force being used against someone who's having an emotional crisis. I know we're both on board with this. We're working, I know the Knoxville Police Department, Memphis, Tennessee Police Department's one to start this after they had a police-involved shooting with a mentally disturbed individual. We're on board. That's underway. It's going to take a while, probably up to a year to get it done, but I know we're all on board with that. What it does not do, and what I think there's a shortfall in, is mental health services. The CIT will cause us to intervene and more than likely not take enforcement, but we have to have institutions, places to provide mental health services for the folks that we deal with out here on the street, as opposed to incarcerating them or as opposed to taking them to the hospital. So that is underway. That's some good news in this community. And
okay. We'll take one more question. Ellen, I can't shut you out. So take one more. The other group is starting to filter in. We're going to have a little wrap-up session. Please,
Well,
Ellen.
I won't take but just a minute. My name is Ellen Clark, and I work with the Sentencing Alternatives Program here in Asheville that's been working in the court system for about 25 years. And about 15 of those years, we've been developing what is now a nationally recognized program called Women at Risk, which is really doing exactly what we are suggesting. That is providing mental health substance abuse treatment for women in lieu of incarceration. Judge Hill is right. There are people who are given mandatory sentences and don't have the benefit of community-based alternatives. But most of the people going to prison are people who could be worked with in the community if alternatives in treatment and substance abuse and jobs and housing and employment and child care were made available to them in a structured and therapeutic setting. That's exactly what the Women at Risk program does. Just a few blocks from Mr. Davis's tire store on Patton Avenue, we've just completed a 3-year recidivism study. And we're here to tell you that women who graduate from our program have been staying, their rearrest, reconviction, and incarceration rates are significantly less than women who were not able to stay with and graduate from the program. The point of this is treatment works. We are seeing more people in the criminal justice system with severe and persistent mental illness. There are treatment programs that work. It's a matter of will and commitment of the community to fund these programs and expand these programs so that more, not less, people can benefit. And finally, this issue of the mothers, we do work in a women's setting. Most of our clients are mothers. Most of our clients who have teenage children these are children who are also in the criminal justice system. So if you want to do something about prevention, it really is about working with moms and helping them make a difference and turn a corner and give them the resources and treatment that any of us would need if we were faced with those similar problems. So it's not completely discouraging. There are some bright spots. Women at Risk is one of those programs. Wilma Sherrill helped us get the funding. Mark Gibney was on our board. Keith Bramlett is on our board. Dwight and Dolly Mullen have been on our board, and they're helping us make this a nationally recognized alternative to prison. And I say, let's have more programs like this and fewer prison beds. Thank you.
Okay. And finally, Jamal Mullen, 30 seconds, Jamal, and then your father will kill me.
Check. No. I was just wanting to say that this is the end result here. And it's easy to point fingers at the end result. What we need to do is look at how many African-American men my age are here representing ourselves and point the fingers more inward and then look outward. That's all I got to say.
All right, thank you. I want to thank the panel. I want to thank the audience. We're going to have a wrap-up session now that will be brief. Also, that at the end of the wrap-up session, if you need want to ride to your car, we have a shuttle service. But what we're going to have is a brief final session entitled What's Next? Okay, so thank you very much. But why don't you just stay seated, let Dwight and the rest of the group come back in, and then we'll wrap this up. Thank you.